Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Q&A. I know, we just had a Q&A a couple of days ago, but it was fun and I saw a lot of decent questions, so I thought, hey, why let's not do another? So the first question comes from Val S. Cord, who says, I really wish they would release the Halloween content. I'm looking forward to it. Do you think the destruction of LA is causing problems with getting new Halloween content out? How much impact do you think it will have for Winter's Day? This is an interesting idea. First of all, I neglect the premise that we don't have Halloween content because they're struggling with things right now. Like, I don't agree with the idea that Halloween is somehow late and that they're struggling, right? I think they always had an internal date that they were going to put it out at, and we still haven't hit that date. For those out of the loop, the whole idea of these festivals originally was, for the first year of the game, they were going to release and create a bunch of these festivals, and they would be reusable things that they could drop back into the game each year to supplement the living world, right? Which meant that during this year, and even to an extent last year, they could have focused much more thoroughly on the living world rather than anything else. And a lot of that has fallen through. You'll notice we didn't get a repeat of Dragon Bash at all, and both Winter's Day and Halloween, which are both two big festivals for this franchise especially, they're both based on a Lion's Arch that hasn't been destroyed. And I do very much believe that they didn't originally plan to destroy Lion's Arch when they were concepting out the living world. I think they probably had it as like an airy, lofty concept that eventually they turned to and said, look, we need to prove to people living world's really good. Let's do this. Let's go all out. Let's do it. And that's really will have affected their plans for Halloween. But do I think that this is now causing them a serious amount of issues? I don't think so at all. I think what's most likely that they'll do, or that I would prefer they do at least, is simply drag and drop those old Halloween and Winter's Day maps into the existing game. Now, the problem here that people are going to say is it will revert Lion's Arch to looking very much like it looked before, and it will completely serve as a detriment to the whole, evolution that Lion's Arch has gone through. But I would rather they do that than spend loads of time working on these festivals, when I'd much prefer to see solid effort go towards the living world. I've discussed on the channel before, the devs have been so quiet with what they've been working on for months now. Absolute months. They have put stuff out, but it's been things that we knew they already worked on, like way back when the Chinese client was coming out almost half a year ago now. So I would like to think that they just sort of continue with that trend and they kind of do a drag and drop for Winter's Day and Halloween. I would be fine with that. I'd even be somewhat excited to see those versions of the map returned. Obviously, they'd still be decorated and so forth, so it wouldn't be exactly like Lion's Arch once was, but it would be nice to go back to that old structure. And this is coming from me, a YouTuber that has a video on my hard drive of like a big grand tour of Lion's Arch. I'd love to be able to upload to you guys like a year from now as kind of a, hey, do you remember the old Lion's Arch kind of situation? And people could be super nostalgic about. They do this at Winter's Day and I undermine something like that, but I do think it's best for the game. Halloween could be a bit of a melting pot of negativity, I'm kind of predicting, with the community. I'm expecting a bit of a backlash if indeed the Halloween that we get is just a rehash of previous content, and it certainly looks like it. Their announcements of it make it sound like it's just a repeat of last year's story. People are going to be very sad. It's going to be the same situation as we had before, where people are wondering, where is the content? What are the devs doing? But I think it's another bullet they're just going to have to take and hope for the love of God that they do have something very good working on in the background. The idea that Halloween could come out again without any serious developments will sting more, I would say, than Winter's Day coming back without any further development. And this is because Halloween, for the past 7 years, longer than that, as long as the Guild Wars franchise has existed, every year Halloween has come back, changed somewhat, and given us more story to the Mad King Thorn-like saga. Halloween has been like this really long, epic tale about the return of Mad King Thorn, and every year has progressed it. And to finally have a year where it doesn't, that's not going to sound good to people, is it? It's really not, and people are going to doomsay about stuff like that. But I think that may be what we end up with. Some very similar content, maybe minor tweaks here and there. Lion's Arch will be interesting. Maybe we'll just have Lion's Arch as it currently stands, but decorated. Surely that won't take too much effort, right? And maybe some new gem store stuff. And that's what I'm expecting from Halloween, and I'm expecting people will be surprised by it. But then other people say that they get excited by Halloween anyway, even if it is just rehashed content, so whatever. The other big interesting thing about Halloween is the idea that the original gem store stuff from the first Halloween will be coming back, like the Ghastly Grinning Shield and like the Chain Greatsword. And if these come back, that's going to be huge for the economy because those are some of the most expensive items in the entire game now. I'd also add, I'd like to see that if they're going to rehash the second year content, can't they rehash the first year content too? I loved that dungeon in the first year. I played it for hours and hours and hours straight. I didn't sleep because I was grinding for so long hoping to get decent drops. I'd love to bask in the nostalgia of that for a little while. Next question is from Night Viper Aura, who says, what I don't understand is how ArenaNet create a game designed for casual players, but created in such a way that it produces hardcore style players who play occasionally. What I mean is, if you look at LFG, it's all 10k plus experience only noobs kicked, for example. Reason is because all people have to do is one of 4 things: fractals, dungeons, bosses, or farm, due to the lack of enjoyable, repeatable endgame content. Their goal seems to be to constantly repeat these areas to produce an item like Ascended or a legendary weapon, and so on. This produces the whole, I only have 2 hours online tonight, need to do XX runs, so no time wasters, get in, get done, get out as fast as possible, now repeat that for hundreds of thousands of people. Sounds casual oriented to you? Don't get me wrong, I like Guild Wars 2, but I find myself questioning ArenaNet more and more recently. It's like they listen to a small niche of players, taking their comments as a reflection of everyone, and in the process of losing sight of what they are and us the players wanted to create in the first place. I found it hard to read your comment to even see what camp you're in, and maybe that's a good thing. There are several points to address here. Number one of your later points, the idea that they listen to just a very small niche of people and take their comments as the whole. I do think ArenaNet are quite smart, at least their statements are quite smart when it comes to receiving criticism from the community. Whenever you see they have criticism levied at them, like for example the leveling changes, right? Most of the people bitching and crying about it were experienced players of the game, people that ArenaNet had already deemed when they were producing this stuff for the Chinese release that it wasn't best to focus on right now. So these people weigh all this criticism at them, and they were quite smart at standing their ground and saying, well look, yes, I appreciate why you guys don't really care that much about it, but we do have a serious issue with this game where we're leaking, you know, new players at X amount of time, and we have to keep these here. It is better for you in the long run, and we are listening to this criticism that exists, and yeah, look, there are bugs. Look, this is flawed. This doesn't work exactly. We'll fix this stuff, but the overall theme of the patch, which was improving the early game experience, they stood by, and they openly said, look, you guys can complain, but you are, what, 1% of the entire community? We're not going to take everything you say as gospel. They do seem to understand that, right? It's just that at some point, I feel, as a developer, or as a collection of developers that makes up a company, you have to come together and reach consensus as to what type of game you want. And you have to appreciate that ArenaNet made a game that was largely casual to play, okay? They wanted that. These were things that they wanted even back with Guild Wars 1, when they were just sick of the staple MMO mold that they wanted to break out of. And I am a firm believer that many of the people at that company are adults with full-time jobs, yes, working on games, but full-time jobs that take their time away from video games, that have hobbies perhaps outside of video games, that have started families, but yet still have this great passion for them. And as a collective, I think these people got together and they made something called Guild Wars 2, which was an MMO people like that could play. And so this is why Guild Wars 2 has the general leaning towards casuals. But here's where things went wrong for ArenaNet. I think they always wanted to lean their game towards casuals, but they did always want to cater to hardcore audiences. You can see it everywhere. Pre-launch, in the media circus of hype that went around Guild Wars 2, there were always comments that there was supposed to be endgame stuff and hardcore-based content for those audiences. And do you know what that content was meant to be originally? It was meant to be dungeons. But the dungeons were poorly designed. And now we have a community that doesn't even recognize that anymore. We have a community think that is pure casual game. The idea of anything hardcore will never come into the game, which is totally untrue. This is why we now see there's a raid designer coming in. I think ArenaNet did want to do the hardcore stuff. They just failed miserably at it. And now they can't go back and change the dungeons. Hell, even on my last Q&A, I had a comment from someone who was basically saying, if ArenaNet make dungeons harder, I will never play them again, as if they were meant to be casual content. Because that's what it's seen as now, but it was never supposed to be casual. And the reasons for why they failed to cater to the hardcore audience so badly are several-fold. I think it's because their combat system was so radically different to not just other MMOs, but what they as a company had made before anyway. So they underappreciated a lot of things. They underappreciated how devastatingly poor their AI was, or how incredibly powerful damage mitigation in this game is. And they ended up having this very simple kind of dungeon experience that was much more suited to casual people. You can see when they introduced fractals, they were trying to do something hardcore. When they updated fractals, they again were trying to do something hardcore. Again with the world bosses, and as I mentioned in that previous Q&A, again now finally with the raids. It's not that they don't want it in the game, it's just that they failed to add it, or they've been very close at getting something good, and then dissolved the team and decided to move on to something else, to my chagrin, which I talked about in the previous video. Your initial question, which was about how you don't understand ArenaNet can create such a casual game, which it is, but can still have it create hardcore players, I think is crazy that you can even ask that question. Any game ever, if people are excited about it, if people want to continue playing it, casual people will turn into hardcore people. And there's this kind of sticky, ugly thought out there at the moment, I think, where people look at this as a negative thing. You know, Blizzard are incredibly good at taking their casual players and making them hardcore players, right? They do it through long-ass gear grinds, through processes that many people look back on once they finally quit their MMO and say, geez, yeah, I was really caught in this rat race there and it wasn't very nice, right? They have these kind of addictive Skinnerbox style systems to wrap people in, and what they're doing is they're changing their casuals into hardcores, and I really think that's a good thing. Maybe you can do it in poor ways, you know, maybe you can criticize Blizzard for the way that they did that with World of Warcraft, but I do think it's a good thing, and I do think you need to be able to convert your casuals into hardcores. Otherwise you just have this insane churn rate for your MMO. You have people join, and then they do stuff like get to level 80, play a little bit of the end game, and they say, ah, this isn't for me, and then they leave. I'd much rather people come into the game and they feel like they have this immense epic journey of, yes, gear progression, both horizontal and vertical, and challenges they can undertake to keep them in the game. That is the game I would love to see, and I'd love to have those challenges there. And it's because I want that stuff there that I keep playing the game, right? This is why someone would go for the Ascended gear, why they would go for the Legendary weapon. It's because they want, as soon as they're invested, they want to keep playing. They're on ArenaNet's side, they just need that content there, and unfortunately, the devs are falling short. My argument is just that any game ever, no matter how casual you lean it, it will create hardcore players. And those hardcore players are good for the game and should be catered to. Anyway, I think I'm preaching to the choir. I think everyone understands that. I think even ArenaNet understands that. They just keep missing the ball and then trying to find new ones before they play with it a little bit. Wow, that metaphor was really weird at the end. The next question is from SWLY, who says, WP, what would you do to improve the World vs. World system, and what do you think needs the biggest change? World vs. World terrifies me, because all I know about it, okay, is that I don't like it very much. I find the large-scale stuff really zergy and boring, and I find the small-scale stuff too difficult to make an impact. And I don't know how to fix that. I really don't. The best thing about World vs. World is like siege deployment stuff, but out of an entire server's worth of people, you only need a few guys to do that kind of thing. It's not indicative of the general World vs. World experience. So what would make World vs. World better? It's so difficult to answer. I think on some level, points per tick is a boring idea to me. I think there needs to be way more objectives. I feel like the maps need to be bigger. They need to be different. The number one biggest change I would love to see occur in World vs. World is the AoE cap removed from skills. And whenever I mention this, people tend to be like, what are you talking about? That would be so stupid. Zergs would just get nuked out instantly. That would be a good thing, right? The main reason people don't enjoy the large-scale Zerg stuff, or at least I know I don't, is because people just abuse the 5-target cap, and the whole point of the game is to Zerg in as tight a possible ball as you can, and just follow the commander, and then you might randomly die because you got bombed at the wrong place, or not. It is an interesting game in terms of positioning, but there's very little variety in the gameplay there. Now, if we had an environment in which there was no cap on skills, you would have actual Zergs forming front lines, mid lines, back lines. You would have people flanking outwards in multiple split groups, and I think that though there's a lot of positional play already in World vs. World with Zerg gameplay, you remove the AoE limit and it suddenly gets way more interesting. Yes, certain groups of people will get blown up and instantly die. That is the risk. There is too much positive stuff that comes from Zerging together. Too much buffs and Condi cleanse and regen and might and boons that you can get from just being stacked together. Well, in this environment, you can do that. You can take that risk risk if you like, but it also means you are at risk for a single player meteor showering the hell out of you, barraging the hell out of you, crippling all of you, and I think that would be fascinating. I would much prefer that. It would make the Zerg v Zerg gameplay feel a lot more epic too, because you don't just have 50 people stacked in a tiny ball, you've got 50 people spread all over the place, taking as much advantage of the terrain as they can, and that's going to look far more impressive on the eyes. I really can't see anything wrong with it, except... and it has been told by the developers on the forums for a long time, it seems to be a well-known fact in the community, though they haven't mentioned it that much, that the reason this doesn't happen is because of server stuff. Unfortunately, this is one of those weird, hard limitations that really cripples the game, in my opinion. I can't believe that the game was coded in this way, that the servers work in such a way that this is impossible to get around. But basically, they can't have every player able to hit every player with a single skill. Imagine the amount of calculations the server would have to do if you have 75 people fighting 75 people, and they can all be hitting, you know, 20, 30, it would just be insane. And so that's why they limit it. That's why you only really see this mechanic come into play with certain situations like Siege or in PvE, where it's a single world boss that can hit everyone, but, you know, that's not going to stress things too much. And this is why they have to avoid that. Think about the lag that used to seriously exist in World vs. World, when 3 servers would all bundle in together in Stone Mist Castle. That lag came because there was just so much damage ticking that the server had to do. You remove the cap, it's going to get way worse. But in my opinion, if they could get around that, the gameplay in World vs. World would be far better. They're still kind of lame to me. I don't know. PPT, I don't know. I feel like on some level, I'm always not going to enjoy it. Last question is from Eru Iluvata, who says, do you think ArenaNet is neglecting and shitting on the GVG competitive scene, especially since all the hardcore fight-oriented guilds left, the recent one being NS? Yeah, I don't think they're necessarily trying to shit on the GVG scene, but they are neglecting it. They never had any hand in its creation. They catered to it once because of a community backlash, because a dev was acting like a jackass in-game, as far as we can speculate, and they created the arena that people could fight in the Obsidian Sanctum, just to die down a bit of the drama. They never said they were against the GVG scene. I mean, what dev would be against a community of people doing something cool in their game? But they haven't supported it, and this is because they always wanted to support Conquest, right? They always wanted to support TPVP, and that was always crippled for its own reasons. But, you know, you can't spread yourself like that. I don't think they've made any updates to the game that seriously hamper and cripple the competitive, if you can call that, GVG scene in World vs. World. They haven't really done any of that either. They've just let them exist. And, you know, if it slowly fizzles out because those players realize, hey, there's not many of us doing it, or because, you know, as individuals, those people start getting bored of, you know, big stack versus big stack forever, then it's going to die away. I don't think ArenaNet should feel obligated to do anything for that scene. Maybe it's in their best interests, but it also depends on what that scene is asking for, and I'm a bit out of loop with that. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Just wanted to have some more talk about the direction of the game and so forth. Tomorrow will probably be a double Let's Play upload of Grimrock and Final Fantasy X-2. I hope you enjoy that, and the other series, the Guild Wars 2 based series I alluded to in previous Q&A, has had some serious headway the past couple of days, so that should be coming out very soon, and I think you guys will enjoy it a lot. I do just want to take this time to say, even though there will be a fair amount of LPing going on non-Guild Wars 2 stuff, that won't necessarily mean a slowdown on Guild Wars 2 videos in the coming weeks. I'm averaging around 3 a week at the moment, and I think that will remain consistent, if not go up, just because of this new series. So, wanted to keep you all in the loop with exactly what's going on. That is it. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.